What if the most mysterious myth in history is not a mere fabrication? Where exactly was Atlantis located? Was it a real civilization that vanished overnight, or simply a philosophical parable? You're about to discover what Plato had to say about Atlantis. What was its city like? What about its army and wealth? How did the war with Athens unfold, and what ultimately led to the downfall of this civilization? We will explore why it was forgotten for 1,000 years, how searches for it spanned from Bactria to Antarctica, and why the enigma of Atlantis continues to haunt the world to this day. Friends, be sure to subscribe to my Quiet History channel, and leave a comment of at least 7 words. This is necessary for the channel to function. Share this video with others if you think it's important. Thank you. The story of Atlantis does not begin with archaeological digs or ancient myths passed down through generations. Instead, its roots lie in a text penned at a specific moment in time by a singular individual, the Athenian philosopher Plato. Prior to his accounts, there is no mention of Atlantis in any surviving sources, whether they be Sumerian cuneiform tablets, Egyptian inscriptions, or Greek legends. Everything we know today originates from 2 of Plato's dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. To grasp how this story came to be, we must delve into the life of Plato himself, examining his ambitions and the world that influenced him. Born in the 5th century BCE in Athens, a city grappling with its own decline, Plato belonged to an ancient aristocratic family with significant political connections. Among his relatives were Charmides and Critias, key figures in the oligarchic regime of the 30 tyrants, which seized power in Athens following its defeat in the Peloponnesian War. This war was a catastrophe for Athens. The defeat signified the loss of political power, an economic downturn, internal strife, epidemics, and a moral crisis. Plato witnessed the collapse of the old order firsthand, observing the rise and fall of various regimes, democratic, oligarchic, and back again, each time plunging society deeper into conflict rather than fostering justice and stability. In his youth, Plato became a student of Socrates, a man whose influence was monumental. Socrates did not author treatises nor aspire to create systematic philosophies, but his method of dialogue and relentless pursuit of truth through questioning left a profound impact. Plato watched as Socrates challenged the very foundations of Athenian democracy, condemning his fellow citizens for moral blindness and urging them toward self-knowledge. This ultimately culminated in tragedy when Socrates was tried and sentenced to death for allegedly corrupting the youth and impiety. His execution shattered Plato's faith in Athenian democracy, leading him to conclude that a just society could not exist if its citizens were devoid of philosophical wisdom. He believed that governance should be in the hands of those guided by reason, not by passion and greed. In the early 4th century BCE, Plato established the Academy, the first philosophical school in history, where subjects such as mathematics, astronomy, music, logic, ethics, and politics were thoroughly studied. It was here that he penned his major works, including the dialogue The Republic, an endeavor to describe an ideal society. It was within this context that the 2 dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, emerged, introducing the tale of Atlantis. Timaeus was written around 360 BCE. At first glance, it appears to focus on the structure of the world, the origins of the universe, the nature of the soul, the movements of the stars, and cosmic harmony. Yet, at the outset, almost as a preface to these reflections, a mysterious story unfolds about an ancient conflict between Athens and Atlantis, a mighty empire said to exist beyond the Pillars of Hercules. present-day Gibraltar. Crucially, Plato does not recount this story as his own invention. Instead, he references a specific chain of transmission. This narrative is allegedly derived from his ancestor, Critias the Younger, who heard it in his youth from Critias the Elder, who, in turn, learned about it from Solon, the great Athenian legislator who lived 2 centuries earlier. Solon is said to have received this tale from Egyptian priests in the city of Sais during his travels. Plato presents a dialogue in which an Egyptian priest, addressing Solon, famously declares, "O Solon, Solon, you Greeks are always children." This remark criticizes the Greeks for failing to preserve their ancient history, which had been repeatedly lost to wars and catastrophes, while the Egyptians maintained written chronicles through the ages. According to the priest, these chronicles contained records of events that transpired 9,000 years before Solon's time. In that era, a vast empire, Atlantis, boasted immense military and economic power, and sought to dominate the known world, including Athens. Yet, despite their limited resources, the Athenians managed to repel the invasion, defending their freedom. Shortly thereafter, Atlantis met its downfall, swallowed by earthquakes and floods in a cataclysm that occurred in just one day and one night, disappearing beneath the ocean's waves. It's essential to emphasize that Plato presents this narrative not as a myth, but as a supposedly credible historical account, passed down through generations. However, it remains unclear whether he believed in the authenticity of this tale or used it as a vehicle for philosophical allegory. The context of Timaeus suggests that Plato was less concerned with historical accuracy and more interested in utilizing the story of Atlantis as an introduction to his discussions on cosmic harmony and the structure of an ideal state. Nevertheless, he takes great care to make the account appear plausible, providing names of participants, describing the location of meetings, and outlining the circumstances under which Solon learned the tale. Following Timaeus, Plato began his work on the dialogue Critias, which was meant to elaborate on Atlantis, its governmental structure, architecture, customs, and way of life. However, the text abruptly ends mid-sentence. The reasons for this abrupt conclusion are uncertain. Perhaps Plato did not complete it in time, or he intentionally left it unfinished. There were plans for a third dialogue, Hermocrates, intended to complete the narrative, but it either was never written or has been lost to history. Contemporaries of Plato, as well as philosophers in later epochs, viewed this story with skepticism. Aristotle explicitly asserted that Plato invented Atlantis to vividly illustrate his views on the consequences of moral decay, pride, and the abandonment of wisdom. Yet, over time, the line between philosophical parable and the quest for a lost civilization began to blur. It is crucial to grasp that Atlantis does not originate from folk myths, oral traditions, or ancient chronicles. Its story emerges within a specific historical moment, in a particular text created by a unique individual. This narrative forms part of Plato's philosophical reflections on the fragility of states and civilizations, dependent not on wisdom and virtue but on greed, pride, and the lust for power. As Plato transitions into the dialogues of Critias, he begins not with musings on morality or politics, but with a detailed account of Atlantis's geography, resources, and appearance. According to him, Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, encapsulating a world rich in wonders and mysteries, yet ultimately serving as a cautionary tale about the perilous nature of power and ambition. What if I told you that a once mighty civilization, greater than Libya and Asia Minor combined, fell from grace due to its own arrogance? Have you ever wondered how a harmonious society could spiral into chaos, ultimately leading to its destruction? Why did the ancient Athenians, a civilization founded on virtue and justice, stand strong against an overwhelming force from Atlantis? In the depths of history lies the story of Atlantis, an island that separated the Mediterranean Sea from the Atlantic Ocean. This vast land was once celebrated for its grandeur and abundance, basking in the blessings of the gods. Its society thrived in harmony, adhering to values that kept their civilization stable and prosperous. However, as generations passed, this divine essence began to wane within the souls of the Atlanteans. With the decline of their virtuous nature, traits such as greed, pride, and avarice began to seep into their daily lives. As opulence grew, so did the extravagance of their palaces and the ostentation of their festivals. The armies of Atlantis became increasingly aggressive, while its rulers drifted away from their sacred oaths, neglecting the well-being of their subjects. This gradual moral decay marked the onset of Atlantis's decline, as it strayed further from the traditions of its ancestors. Instead of upholding justice and order, the Atlanteans began to lust for power, seeking to conquer neighboring lands and amass wealth at any cost. As Plato emphasizes, this was the turning point. The once great civilization, built on a foundation of harmony with the divine and nature, shifted its gaze towards domination over the entire world. Their ambitions extended beyond their shores, reaching towards the famed Pillars of Heracles. According to the Egyptian priests whose accounts Plato utilized, Atlantis subdued numerous islands and extensive territories along the Mediterranean, enforcing its dominance over Libya, right up to the borders of Egypt, and stretching into Europe as far as Tyrrhenia. The people of these regions were forced to pay tribute, provide troops, ships, livestock, metals, and anything else necessary to sustain Atlantis's might. This insatiable desire for conquest was not motivated by security or necessity, but stemmed from an internal disintegration. The moral crisis that emerged as the divine spark within the Atlanteans dimmed. Their actions became increasingly defined by greed and the relentless pursuit of unchecked power. At this critical juncture, the rulers of Atlantis set their sights on Athens, which, during that era, was a stark contrast to what it would later become. As Plato narrates, ancient Athens wasn't a society fueled by luxury or military might. Instead, it was grounded in principles of virtue, justice, and strict adherence to the laws imparted by the goddess Athena. The citizens of Athens lived simply, dedicated to their work, honoring the gods, and prioritizing harmony over the accumulation of wealth. Athens was a model polis where reason, law, and mutual respect governed their lives rather than money or brute force. When the rulers of Atlantis decided to conquer Athens, they dispatched envoys demanding submission to their supremacy and the payment of tribute, just as other nations had done before them. The response from the Athenians was unequivocal. They rejected any encroachment on their freedom and categorically refused to bow to foreign authority. Recognizing that there could be no compromise, they immediately began preparations for war. Soon, Atlantis mobilized its formidable military might. According to Plato, the Atlantean army was vast and awe-inspiring. Thousands of chariots, tens of thousands of infantry, numerous cavalry units, and an immense fleet capable of transporting troops across oceans and enforcing a blockade along the coastline were all part of this colossal force. Shipyards were in constant operation, forging weapons, constructing new ships, and stockpiling provisions. The Atlantean army was armed with the finest weaponry available at the time: bronze armor, swords, spears, shields, siege engines, and catapults. Understanding the dire situation they faced against an adversary far superior in numbers and resources, the Athenians initiated a full-scale mobilization. Men of all ages capable of bearing arms joined the ranks of their military. The city geared up for defense, reinforcing its walls, erecting additional fortifications in anticipation of a siege, and stockpiling food supplies while creating weapons. Above all, the Athenians relied on the strength of their unity, the courage of their citizens, and the favor of the gods who protected them. The first phase of the conflict involved a naval blockade. Atlantis dispatched its fleet to the shores of Attica with the intent of cutting off Athens' trade and supply routes before launching a direct assault on the city. However, the Athenians had prepared for this very scenario, constructing swift and agile ships that were far better suited for coastal combat than the heavy war vessels of Atlantis. The naval battles proved to be fierce and protracted, with the Athenians launching nighttime raids on enemy ships, setting traps in coves and skillfully exploiting their knowledge of the local waters. Despite their numerical advantage, the Atlanteans found themselves thwarted at sea. After suffering several significant defeats, they realized that capturing Athens from the water was an impossible task, prompting a shift towards a land operation. The Atlantean forces landed on the shores of Attica and began their march toward the city walls, expecting to overwhelm Athens in a matter of days. However, the Athenians took advantage of the terrain's strategic benefits. They fortified mountain passes, erected barricades, mined key approaches to critical roads, and prepared defensive positions on hills and in valleys. The land battles stretched on for not days or weeks, but months. Athenians employed a flexible defense strategy, transitioning to sudden counterattacks, setting ambushes, striking at supply lines, and disrupting communications. The Atlanteans, accustomed to swift victories and complete dominance, soon found themselves embroiled in a protracted war where their numerical superiority began to yield diminishing returns. They suffered losses in the mountains. Their troops were depleted by fruitless assaults on the fortified positions, and attempts to breach the city were consistently thwarted. The climax of this campaign came in a large-scale battle, where the Athenians, using a tactical feint, lured the main Atlantean forces into a narrow valley, where ambushes had been meticulously prepared. From three sides, a hail of arrows, stones, and infantry charged upon the enemy. Surrounded, the Atlanteans struggled to break through, but the geography of the area hindered their chariots and heavy infantry from deploying effectively. The battle ended in a complete rout of the Atlantean forces. Simultaneously, the Athenians launched an assault on the enemy fleet anchored off the coast. While the bulk of the Atlantean army was engaged on land, swift Athenian ships targeted the enemy vessels, setting fire to those at anchor and sinking heavy transports, effectively severing the enemy's means of retreat. The remnants of the Atlantean army, cut off from their fleet and suffering substantial losses, turned and fled. This victory was absolute. The Athenians not only defended their homeland, but also demonstrated that virtue, unity, courage, and fidelity to the law could triumph over any numerical or material superiority. They chose not to pursue the fleeing enemy, nor impose demands upon the defeated. Athens had no desire for conquest. They merely sought to preserve their freedom and way of life. Have you ever wondered what really happened to Atlantis? Did the great philosophers like Plato and Aristotle believe in its existence, or was it just a clever allegory? And why did this legend disappear from history for so many centuries, only to resurface as explorers ventured into uncharted waters? Let's dive into the enigma of Atlantis, a story that weaves together philosophy, history, and the unquenchable human thirst for knowledge. In a time long past, a profound battle unfolded between the mighty city of Athens and the fabled continent of Atlantis. This was not merely a struggle for territory, it was a clash of ideals: freedom, independence, and justice against greed, power, and moral decay. The victors, the Athenians, emerged triumphant, securing not just their land but their very way of life. Philosophers of antiquity, such as Aristotle, perceived this narrative not as a factual account, but rather as a philosophical parable, illustrating the principles of morality and the structure of an ideal state. Aristotle himself suggested that Plato conjured the tale of Atlantis to impart wisdom, using it as a vehicle to explore deeper truths about governance and virtue. As centuries rolled on, the interest in Atlantis dwindled. Prominent historians like Herodotus, Polybius, Strabo, and Pliny the Elder largely ignored the tale, letting it fade into obscurity. The once celebrated story of a grand civilization gradually transformed into a mere metaphor, an example of what happens when societies lose their moral compass and turn away from divine laws. During the late antiquity, as classical philosophy gave way to Neoplatonism, the mention of Atlantis remained but an allegorical reference. Philosophers discussing the cosmos, the immortality of the soul, or the laws of the universe occasionally invoked its name, yet always as a symbol of decline and destruction, inevitable for any civilization that forsakes its connection to the divine order. The fall of the Western Roman Empire ushered in the Middle Ages, a time when the thirst for knowledge from antiquity nearly vanished. In Europe, the focus shifted profoundly towards issues of morality, theology, and the salvation of the soul, overshadowing any curiosity about the past, geography, or the natural world. While the dialogues of Plato continued to exist, copied in monasteries, and preserved in the libraries of Constantinople, the tale of Atlantis lost its prominence, appearing almost as an afterthought amidst a myriad of other philosophical ideas. Medieval thinkers did not outright reject the existence of Atlantis. They simply showed little interest. Instead, biblical tales of Sodom and Gomorrah, the Great Flood, and the Tower of Babel took precedence, captivating the imaginations of the time. Any references to Atlantis that did emerge were fleeting and insubstantial, often presented in the context of divine retribution against prideful nations. Occasionally, it would surface in commentaries on Plato or rare encyclopedias crafted by Byzantine authors, yet these mentions were brief, lacking depth or significance. Even medieval cartographers, when mapping a world filled with wonders and unknown lands, seldom included Atlantis in their designs. Their imaginations conjured images of the blessed islands of Eden or sacred places believed to harbor Christian relics, but the notion of a sunken continent remained foreign to medieval thought. Yet, the legend of Atlantis did not vanish entirely. It continued to exist, albeit quietly, within the margins of rewritten copies of Plato's dialogues. It was preserved in the works of Arab scholars, in the Library of Constantinople, and among the few Byzantine philosophers and theologians who retained an interest in ancient heritage. Though it did not resonate loudly, Atlantis' name lingered in the cultural memory, allowing it to survive the tumultuous Middle Ages. As Europe began to rekindle its interest in classical antiquity during the Renaissance, the name Atlantis re-emerged, capturing the imaginations of scholars and adventurers alike. New hypotheses sprouted, suggesting that Atlantis might be linked to the New World or to lost islands previously unknown to Europeans. This rekindled interest coincided with a fervor for exploration. Portuguese and Spanish ships sailed beyond the Pillars of Hercules, venturing into the Atlantic Ocean and discovering new islands and lands that ancient geographers had never even dreamed of. The appearance of the Azores, the Canaries, Madeira, and many other territories prompted speculation. Could these islands be remnants of the vast land described by Plato? The Azores, situated right in the heart of the Atlantic Ocean, far beyond the known world, seemed to align with Plato's descriptions. Their mountainous terrain led some to believe that they could represent the peaks of a submerged continent, once rising majestically above the ocean. Simultaneously, the Canaries drew attention for their unique indigenous people, the Guanches, who, before the arrival of Europeans, maintained an extraordinary culture with unusual rituals and legends of ancestors who had arrived from great lands that vanished beneath the waves. These narratives began to intertwine with the story of Atlantis, leading some to speculate that the Guanches might be the last descendants of those who survived a catastrophic event. Then came the boldest hypothesis following the discovery of America. Almost immediately after Christopher Columbus crossed the ocean and unveiled the New World, some began to suggest that Atlantis itself might be this very continent. The vast expanse of land beyond the ocean appeared to fit the mold of a vanished world. Not only its size, but also the remarkable achievements of indigenous civilizations, such as the Maya, Aztecs, and Incas, fascinated European minds. Their cities, temples, intricate road systems, and astronomical knowledge awed observers, leading many to believe that such a high level of development could not have occurred without the influence of an ancient, advanced civilization. These ideas found their way into the writings of philosophers, historians, and geographers. Maps from the 16th century often bore inscriptions like Atlantis or Island of Atlantis, scattered throughout the Atlantic Ocean, from the Bermuda Triangle to the Caribbean islands and the Brazilian coastline. Some cartographers envisioned Atlantis as a colossal sunken continent, while others depicted it as a chain of islands left behind after some cataclysm. At the same time, the first attempts to explain the disappearance of Atlantis emerged not solely through mythological lenses, but through natural processes. Theories began to circulate that a series of powerful earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, the gradual subsidence of the Earth's crust, or massive tsunamis might have caused the island to sink. This line of reasoning gained credibility, especially in light of real catastrophes that occurred throughout history, like the eruption of the Santorini volcano, which annihilated the Minoan civilization and served as a model for what might have happened to Atlantis. Despite the overwhelming intrigue surrounding Atlantis, no convincing evidence of its existence has ever been unearthed. Neither the Azores nor the Canaries, nor any land in America or the Caribbean, has yielded ruins, artifacts, or any remnants of a civilization that could potentially be linked to the legendary Atlantis. The quest for this lost world continues to capture our imagination, a testament to the enduring power of storytelling and the human desire to uncover the mysteries of the past. What if everything you thought you knew about Atlantis was wrong? Did Plato merely weave a tale, or was he hinting at a lost civilization that vanished without a trace? As the legend of Atlantis continues to tantalize our imaginations, we delve into the depths of history, philosophy, and science to uncover the truths behind this enigmatic myth. The fascination with Atlantis, as described by Plato, transcends mere geography and history. This mythical land has evolved into a symbol within literary utopias, sparking philosophical discussions about the fate of civilizations and serving as a wellspring of inspiration for writers, explorers, and even mystics. The tale of Atlantis morphs, gaining layers of meaning that extend far beyond its original narrative of a proud civilization's demise. In recent times, the first underwater geological expeditions have surfaced, dedicated to studying the intricate structures of the ocean floor. Atlantis, once confined to philosophical musings and mystical theories, gradually transitions into a subject of scientific exploration. By the dawn of the 20th century, the legend of Atlantis has firmly established itself as a potential historical enigma, shifting from the realm of myth and speculation to the rigorous scrutiny of archaeology, geology, and oceanography. Among the most compelling hypotheses of the 20th century is the theory connecting Atlantis to the catastrophic eruption that devastated the island of Santorini in the Aegean Sea. Mid-century discoveries reveal a remarkably preserved Bronze Age city, Akrotiri, buried beneath volcanic ash. Its streets, homes, frescoes, sewage systems, and advanced infrastructure astonish researchers with their cultural sophistication. The catastrophic volcanic eruption around the 16th century before Christ obliterated this city, delivering a devastating blow to the Minoan civilization of Crete. Researchers begin to draw parallels between this disaster, characterized by massive tsunamis, earthquakes, and prolonged climatic upheavals, and the sudden disappearance of Atlantis. However, the most significant argument against this theory lies in geography. Santorini does not lie beyond the Pillars of Hercules as Plato described, but rather within the confines of the Mediterranean Sea. Furthermore, the temporal discrepancy spans thousands of years. Plato asserts that Atlantis perished 9,000 years before Solon, placing its demise in the 10th millennium before Christ, long before the eruption of Santorini. Another surge of interest arises in 1968 when an unusual underwater stone formation is discovered off the coast of Bimini, a small island in the Bahamas. Dubbed the Bimini Road, this seemingly linear arrangement of evenly shaped blocks appears to be the remnants of an ancient road or wall. Photographs spread rapidly across the globe, and claims that these ruins are evidence of Atlantis flood the media within days. Yet, further investigations reveal that the Bimini Road is merely a natural geological formation, a result of the erosion and layering of limestone slabs typical of the region. Scientists uncover similar structures elsewhere in the Caribbean, reinforcing the notion that the Bimini Road is of natural origin. Nonetheless, for many Atlantis enthusiasts, Bimini remains a symbol of hope that the lost city may have once existed. A separate line of inquiry even directs the search for Atlantis to the polar regions, specifically Antarctica. This theory gains traction in the latter half of the 20th century, largely due to the work of Charles Hapgood, who proposes the concept of continental drift. According to his hypothesis, Antarctica once occupied more temperate latitudes, free from ice, and could have been home to an advanced civilization. A shift in the Earth's crust, Hapgood argues, caused the continent to slide to the pole, freezing over and becoming inhospitable to life. These ideas attract a following among enthusiasts of mysteries and alternative histories, yet they struggle to withstand scientific scrutiny. Current geological evidence shows that Antarctica has been covered in ice for at least several million years, ruling out the possibility of a civilization akin to Plato's description of Atlantis. Simultaneously, as the theories surrounding Bimini, Antarctica, and Santorini develop, underwater archaeology experiences a remarkable transformation. With the invention of scuba gear, bathyscaphs, and advanced sonar mapping techniques, scientists embark on a new era of exploration beneath the ocean's surface. As they probe deeper, it becomes increasingly clear that no hidden sunken continent lies within the Atlantic Ocean. All the prominent features of the ocean floor, the mid-Atlantic ridge, the Azores Plateau, and underwater canyons, are products of tectonic activity, not remnants of submerged landmasses. At this juncture, the scientific community concludes that the hypothesis of Atlantis as a physical island in the Atlantic Ocean lacks substantial foundation. Despite the skepticism of mainstream science, The search for Atlantis persists, shifting to various regions such as the shelves off the coasts of Morocco and Spain, the islands of the Caribbean, and the Black Sea, where records of catastrophic flooding have also been documented. New theories emerge suggesting that Plato may have deliberately altered geographical details, inflated numbers, or manipulated timelines to craft a philosophical parable about the moral decline of civilization rather than a literal historical account. It becomes increasingly apparent that Atlantis represents more than a quest for a geographical location. It symbolizes a universal concern. The legend resonates with humanity's enduring fear of civilization's collapse, highlighting the destruction that ensues when society loses its balance, strays from moral foundations, and forgets the importance of harmony with nature and principles of justice. By the end of the 20th century, Atlantis has woven itself intricately into not only academic debates, but also popular culture. The myth finds expression in literature, film, documentaries, and becomes a staple of journalistic investigations and discussions in university classrooms and online forums. Spanning millennia, the legend of Atlantis continues to thrive into the 21st century, captivating imaginations in scientific hypotheses, cultural myths, cinema, literature, video games, and endless discussions. While academia tends to regard Atlantis as more of a philosophical metaphor than a historical reality, the allure of this lost civilization remains palpable and robust. Modern scientific data are unequivocal. Oceanographic studies, marine mapping, and tectonic models indicate that there are no sunken continents in the Atlantic Ocean. Yet, a segment of historians and archaeologists persists in their quest to uncover a kernel of truth within Plato's narrative. Among the most credible theories is the idea that the myth of Atlantis reflects real catastrophes that occurred in prehistoric times. Nevertheless, the interest in Atlantis long ago transcended the boundaries of scholarly inquiry. It has become a vital piece of global cultural mythology, its imagery appearing in films, literature, comics, video games, and speculative series. Whether envisioned as a sunken, technologically advanced metropolis, a magical realm hidden beneath the waves, or the last remnant of an ancient race with forgotten wisdom, the story of Atlantis continues to captivate our collective imagination. Have you ever wondered what secrets lie beneath the waves of the ocean, waiting to be uncovered? Can the grand visions of Jules Verne and H.G. Wells hold any truth in our quest for understanding the myth of Atlantis? Why does this legendary civilization continue to captivate our imagination and inspire countless stories, from epic blockbusters to animated films? Atlantis stands as a formidable symbol of a lost golden age, a yearning for a great past filled with forgotten knowledge and harmony that humanity once possessed but has since lost. Today, Atlantis embodies a complex blend of myth and metaphor, intertwined with our cultural consciousness. It serves not only as a tantalizing puzzle for scientists, but also as a wellspring of inspiration for artists and storytellers alike. For the scientific community, Atlantis remains an unsolved riddle, a hypothesis that sparks endless debates and discussions, even in the face of geological evidence that may contradict its existence. Scholars and researchers continue to probe into the depths of this enigma, searching for any clues that could validate the tales of a technologically advanced civilization that once thrived. Despite the setbacks, the allure of Atlantis persists, and the quest for answers fuels an ongoing dialogue among experts and enthusiasts. In the realm of popular culture, Atlantis transcends mere storytelling. It has become an inexhaustible source of inspiration, a symbol of an ideal that has been lost to time. From epic adventures in cinema to whimsical depictions in animated features, the notion of Atlantis ignites the imagination and invites audiences to dream of what once was, a society flourishing in wisdom and innovation, now only a shadow of its former self. Moreover, for the collective human psyche, Atlantis serves as a poignant reminder that the might of technology and the accumulation of wealth do not guarantee the survival or prosperity of a society. The tales of this mythical city compel us to reflect on our own civilization, urging us to consider the potential consequences of our advancements. As we navigate through our modern world, filled with rapid technological progress, we are reminded of the delicate balance between progress and the very essence of what it means to be human. In essence, the myth of Atlantis weaves together threads of nostalgia, ambition, and caution. It asks us to ponder the legacies we leave behind and the lessons we can learn from the past. As we continue our exploration of history and its mysteries on Quiet History, let us keep the spirit of Atlantis alive in our hearts and minds, ever striving to uncover the truths that lie hidden beneath the surface.